welcome you to the channel which explores the content beneficial to student, faculty and industry professionals. This video exchanges the views on when a researcher should use multi-criteria decision-making MCDM approach. I am Professor Jitesh J. Thakkar, Dean Academics and Professor Logistics and Supply Chain Management at Gati Shakti Vishwavidyalaya, Central University, India's first university in transportation and logistics sector, a central university sponsored by the Ministry of Railways, Government of India. I am ex-professor, IIT Kharagpur. I would like to brief you about this channel. The name of channel is Professor Dr. Jitesh J. Thakkar. It has currently the playlist Faculty and Student Development, Logistics, Supply Chain and Infrastructure Planning. You can scan this QR code to explore the intellectual content on this channel benefiting students, industry professionals and faculty. Particularly about this platform, playlist, faculty and student development. This domain of faculty and student development is a multifaceted agenda to groom the faculty and student on various dimensions within the broader domain of teaching, research and experiential learning. The aim of this platform is to address how faculty and student can respond to evolving educational needs and challenges in interdisciplinary education and research requirement as expected by New Education Policy NEP 2020. The platform shares the content in three broader domains to ensure the 360-degree development of the faculty and student in higher education institutions. Number one, enhancing teaching effectiveness using improved pedagogical skills, utilize educational technology and foster critical thinking for solving complex problems. Number two, promote research excellence and productivity by providing training in research methodologies, data analysis, and scholarly writing. And number three, enhance experiential learning through projects, internships, and exposure to real-world problems. This platform explores critical dimensions of faculty and student development for enhancing the capability and quality of the most important stakeholders of the higher education system, that is faculty and students. Let me begin with a brief on Gati Shakti Vishwavidyalaya, GSV. It is a central university created in 2022 by the Act of Parliament and it operationalized on 6 December 2022. It has a unique mandate to create a best-in-class resource pool for the entire transportation and logistics sector, including rail, road, water, aviation, ports, and shipping, across three important dimensions: technology, that is infrastructure, management, that is services, and policy, that is regulations. The university offers the program at all the levels: UG, undergraduate, postgraduate, PhD, and executive training program to provide a sustained, skilled human resource for the transport and logistics sector. The university follows a demand-driven curriculum to meet the industry needs of the transportation sector, high-quality faculty with global exposure, and leveraging state-of-the-art infrastructure of centralized training institutions of Indian Railways sets a unique advantage for the university Gati Shakti Vishwavidyalaya. GSV is propelling the nation towards a new era of interconnectedness and sustainable development through innovations and best practices in transportation and logistics sector. The university operates with a very contemporary and strong vision, that is innovation-led, industry-driven university, which is the demand of society, industry, and the larger ecosystem in transport and logistics sector to innovate and to offer the courses, programs, and deliverables which are industry relevant. The mission of university includes best in the world futuristic education and research, effective collaboration with industry and stakeholders, and imbibe and internalize professional work ethics and culture to foster lifelong learning environment. University offers academic programs for both the categories for regular students as well as for working professionals. For regular students, the programs are offered under both technology and management streams. Under technology stream, it is BTech in civil engineering with specialization in rail engineering. So 15 to 20% credits are devoted for the specialization in rail or transportation engineering. Similarly, BTech in electronics and communication with specialization in rail engineering, BTech in mechanical engineering with specialization in rail engineering, BTech in electrical engineering with specialization in rail engineering, BTech in artificial intelligence and data science with specialization in transportation and logistics, BTech in aviation engineering, MBA in logistics and supply chain management, MBA in ports and shipping logistics jointly with Indian Maritime University. University also contributes to the ecosystem of the transport and logistics sector by offering the programs for working professionals for their upskilling and reskilling, which includes MTech in intelligent transport system. These programs are offered in hybrid mode to accommodate the busy schedule and convenience of the working professionals, in which 80% of the content is delivered in real time online mode, and for 20% offline content, industry professionals, they come for the campus immersion. So MTech in intelligent transport system, MTech in rail engineering, MTech in bridge and tunnel engineering, MBA in logistics and supply chain management, MBA metro rail management, MBA multimodal transportation, MBA aviation and operations management, and university offers PhD in engineering and PhD in management with a strong focus on transportation and logistics sector. I'm happy to share my contribution in the domain of multi-criteria decision making, and this talk is dedicated on why researchers should use multi-criteria decision making approach. I have published a textbook on multi-criteria decision making. It is published by Springer under the series of Studies in Systems Decision and Control, and this book typically includes the large variety of multi-criteria decision-making techniques with concept, mathematical background, illustrative examples, advantages, limitations, and typically the context in which this technique is particularly suitable. So the book Chapter 1 begins with the introductory idea about the multi-criteria decision making versus single criteria decision making and what are the broader areas in which MCDM is most useful. Chapter 2 talks about simple additive weightage, one of the multi-criteria decision making techniques, and similarly Chapter 3 analytic hierarchy process, Chapter 4 analytic network process, Chapter 5 technique for order preference and similarity to ideal solution, topsies. Chapter 6, elimination at choice, translating reality, that is Electre. Chapter 7, it is Prometheus. Chapter 8 offers detailed understanding on Beaker, one of the multi-criteria decision-making techniques. Chapter 9, decision-making trial and evaluation laboratory, that is DMATL. Chapter 10, fuzzy integral and Gray relation. Chapter 11, offers detailed understanding with application on multi-objective optimization on the basis of ratio analysis method, that is Mura. Chapter 12, linear programming technique for multi-dimensional analysis of preference, LinMap. Chapter 13, complex proportion assessment method, that is COPRAS. Chapter 14 provides understanding on additive ratio assessment method, ARF or ERAS. Chapter 15, weighted aggregated sum product assessment called WASPAS. Chapter 16, stepwise weight assessment ratio and analysis, SWARA. So it provides the detailed understanding, mathematical background, step-by-step procedure, illustrative examples, and advantages and disadvantages, and its utility for a particular context. About 15 different kind of multi-criteria decision-making techniques. In addition to that, graph theory analysis is the advanced technique which is also included. Interpretive structural modeling. So in totality, it covers total 70 multi-criteria decision-making techniques. Chapter 19, Chapter 20, and Chapter 21 offers the applications of integrated approach of 2 or 3 different multi-criteria decision-making techniques. So depending on the context, you may have to integrate the use of 2 or 3 different kind of multi-criteria decision-making technique to sharpen your analysis, improve the discriminatory power of your analysis, and derive better recommendations. So chapter 19 integrates gray HP and gray topsis. Chapter 20 integrates fuzzy FMEA, failure mode effect analysis, and Wicker. And chapter 21 integrates D-metal ANP MCDM approach for quantifying supply chain risk. So let us look at what is decision making. So decision making is all about a systematic process and formal process which involves 4 steps. Number 1, identification of the problem. Number 2, deriving preferences. Number 3, evaluating alternatives. And number 4, identification of the best alternative and then examining their suitability for the real life context. So the domain of decision making is vast. Broadly, it has 3 kinds of analysis. Number 1 is descriptive analysis, where you arrange the information or data in tabular form, graphical form, and then you try to derive certain inferences. Prescriptive analysis, it uses the methods to enable decision makers for an improved analysis and predictive ability. Normative analysis, it deals with the problems with extensively demand the involvement of decision makers in problem solving through evaluation of set of arguments, trying to present right and wrong about the situation. So thesis, antithesis kind of approach you adapt to evolve the solution or the recommendations for a complex problem. If we typically look at the decision making with multi-criteria decision making approach, then the hierarchy presented on the right side is decision variables, then you have alternatives, then you have criteria, outcomes, preferences, and then you reach to the decision. If you look at the left side, then the flow chart depicts the complete process of multi-criteria decision-making technique, in which you first identify the problem structure, define the problem, formulate the problem, then you come for the problem definition, which includes objective function, criteria, alternatives, constraints. This helps you to identify your multi-criteria decision-making hierarchy, which involves set of criteria like C1 to C7 and set of alternatives like alternative 1, alternative 2, alternative 3. Then you develop the decision matrix, application of analytical models. So as I mentioned, there are different kind of 17 multi-criteria decision-making techniques. You can choose the appropriate one fitting to the context, and you apply the analytical model, which would result into the ranking of the alternatives. If there is a consensus on the ranking of the alternatives, it may be about the projects, it may be about the funding, it may be about the selection of the technology. Then you derive the detailed recommendation and implement those recommendations, allocate the funds, and so on. If there is no consensus among the subject experts, among the professionals for the priorities or the ranking derived for the alternatives, then you have to go back and once again iterate with your hierarchy, gather the information from the subject expert, and once again see whether you can derive the consensus or not. So typically, multi-criteria decision-making technique can be divided into 2 broad categories. Number 1 It is multi-attribute decision making, which considers limited number of predetermined alternatives and discrete preference rating, and multi-objective decision making MODM, which accommodates design and planning related problems for deriving an optimal solution of set of goals for set of interaction prevailing among the constraints. So the process of MCDM is very simple, which is divided into three simple steps. Number one, identification of the relevant criteria and alternatives from the existing theory and practice. Number two, assignment of the numerical values to criteria to indicate their relative importance and to quantify the impacts of the alternatives on this criteria. Number three, use a formal mathematical procedure. This means choose an appropriate multi-criteria decision-making technique suitable for the context and the kind of research questions you are trying to investigate, and derive the weightages, ranking, priorities of the alternatives. So this is the pictorial representation. Suppose you have the three different populations to be analyzed, and the decision matrix A representing population A, decision matrix B representing population B, decision matrix C representing population C. Then you can derive the aggregate decision matrix representing all the populations, apply the multi-criteria decision-making technique, and get into the evaluation, prioritization of the alternatives. So if you compare broadly the single criteria decision-making technique with the multi-criteria decision-making technique, then in single criteria decision-making technique, it is characterized by single criteria or a single aggregate measure like cost. In case of multi-criteria decision-making, you may have conflicting multiple criteria like cost, risk, profit, performance, and so on. If you look at the problem structure, then single criteria decision making has single criteria as the objective function. You may like to maximize the profit or you may like to minimize the cost. Constraints indicates the requirements on alternatives, and depending on the characteristics of the optimization problem, you can make use of different kind of optimization techniques for single criteria decision making technique like linear programming, integer programming, non-linear programming, discrete optimization, and so on. In case of multi-criteria decision making, it is characterized by finite number of criteria and feasible alternatives. Let us look at some of the interesting applications of multi-criteria decision making technique to appreciate that this class of techniques has a very wide spectrum to cover, and almost all the domains, whether it is engineering, management, medical science, social science, humanities, all the areas, multi-criteria decision-making technique are extensively useful, and it has been used since last 2 decades extensively, rigorously for solving many complex, typical problems involving conflicting objectives. So let us say you want to decide the base school, maybe a personal multi-criteria decision-making problem, then distance, reputation, cost, teacher will become the criteria, and different kind of schools will become the alternatives. Similarly, you want to determine the PhD topic. Then what is the novelty? Usefulness to society, availability of existing literature, research cost, and you have list of PhD topics. When you prioritize the list of PhD topics for the novelty, utility for society, availability of existing literature, research cost, you can find out maybe 1 or 2 promising area that to be considered for pursuing PhD. Similarly, finding best apartment, it depends on price, down payment condition, distance from shops, bus, train, metro station, airport, school, neighbors, friendliness, and you have alternatives as list of apartment under consideration. Similarly, buying a house is a multi-criteria decision-making problem, outsourcing decisions in the organization. Similarly, a vacation destination, selecting a hotel, selection of mobile phone, which depends on price, availability, storage, camera, look, serviceability, and so on. campus recruitment, and so on. Now let us come to the critical question and try to have a deep dive into the issue when a researcher should consider multi-criteria decision-making approach. So let us see what are those situations under which multi-criteria decision-making technique has been widely used and successfully deployed to derive meaningful, acceptable insights and recommendations for the industry, society, or any other context. So the first one, multiple conflicting criteria. If you are dealing with multiple conflicting criteria, then trade-offs are necessary, and maybe this can, for example, if you are evaluating the factory location, this can include cost of land, proximity to transportation, availability of skilled labor, environmental impact, and so on. And these criteria are conflicting nature. So when you are dealing with multiple conflicting criteria, yes, MCDM is the most wise and reasonable choice. Second, qualitative and quantitative criteria. Many situations, you really have to deal with not only the conflicting criteria, but you have to deal with the mix of objective and subjective criteria, qualitative factors. So you can have maybe the measurable data, cost, distance, which are more quantitative, subjective in nature, so objective in nature. On the other hand, you have the subjective or qualitative factors like aesthetic, social impact, and it is very difficult many a times to use other kind of optimization approaches, and multi-criteria decision making provides a much ease and flexibility of evaluating both tangible and intangible, objective and subjective conflicting criteria simultaneously. So I give the example, let us say selecting a supplier involves considering price, which is quantitative, as well as reliability. But on the other hand, if you look at the reputation, which is qualitative in nature. The number 3 situation in which MCDM becomes the best choice is multiple stakeholders with different preferences. So suppose you are executing a project and there are multiple stakeholders involved, government, private agencies, maybe contractors, suppliers, then they have different priorities, values, and that may lead to disagreements, and typically disagreement about the best course of action. So here you have to use an approach like multi-criteria decision-making technique, which can provide a structured and transparent process for incorporating stakeholders' preferencing and deriving the consensus among the stakeholders. So, for example, developing a new urban development plan involves considering the interest of residents, businesses, environmental groups, government agencies, and they have different opinions, preferences. They give value to different dimensions, and it's many a time very difficult to derive that consensus, but MCDM approach can help the decision maker to involve all the stakeholders at one platform and reach to a reasonable consensus. Number 4 situation, complex evaluation and ranking of alternatives. So there are numerous possible alternatives to choose from, making it difficult to evaluate them all intuitively. And that is something where you can deploy multi-criteria decision-making approach to examine the multiple alternatives and complex criteria in a more transparent manner. For example, you want to choose renewable energy technology for a specific region, which involves comparing various options like solar, wind, hydro, based on the factors like cost, efficiency, environment impact, and reliability. And certainly, it is difficult to consider multiple alternatives and multiple criteria at a time and simultaneously evaluate them. And this is something where MCDM sets a perfect pitch for a decision-making process. The 5th situation, when you need justification and transparency in decision making, and there is a strong desire for a clear and justifiable rationale for decision made. For example, government agencies using MCDM to select infrastructure projects typically which demands huge amount of resource fund allocation, and the most important is to ensure the transparency and accountability in the use of public funds. So this is another situation where researcher or the consultant would like to rely on multi-criteria decision-making approach to reach to a reasonable, acceptable, and consensus-based decision. There are commonality among MCDM methods, and there are some of the common MCDM methods which are widely used. When I have given you the list of about 17 multi-criteria decision-making techniques, all are absolutely useful depending upon the nature of the problem and scope of the context. But for example, analytic hierarchy process is one of the widely used technique which breaks down the complex decision into the hierarchy of criteria, alternatives, engages the decision maker or the experts into the pairwise comparison and weighting. The other method is technique for order of preference by similarity to ideal solution, TOPSIS. It identifies the alternatives that is the closest to the ideal solution and farthest from the negative, and helps you to derive the ranking of the alternatives. Your weaker focuses on minimizing individual regret and maximizing group utility. So I'm just giving you a few examples. There are more than 17 multi-criteria decision-making techniques, and you have to make a sound choice depending upon the nature of the problem, research question you are investigating, and the need for transparency and the consensus which is desired at the end of the decision-making process. So multi-criteria decision-making is used in a wide range of fields. It is highly versatile, typically when the complex decisions with multiple, often conflicting criteria need to be made. Let us quickly look at some of the MCDM applications. You want to investigate the issues of environmental management, for example, selecting a site for waste disposal facility, and here you have to consider the criteria like groundwater contamination, air pollution, as a part of cost, land acquisition, construction, social impact, proximity to residential area, and regulatory compliances. So MCDM technique like analytic hierarchy process can really benefit the decision maker and provide a very sound platform for the rational choices decision making under this situation. Prioritizing river restoration project. This is one of the very critical area government is targeting. So a government agency needs to decide which river restoration projects to fund. Criteria can include ecological benefits, improving water quality, restoring fish habitats, economic benefits, increased tourism, flood control, social benefits, recreational opportunities. MCDM approach can help to rank the projects based on this diverse criteria. Let us look at another interesting domain where MCDM is equally useful is the urban planning and development. You can have a problem choosing a transportation system for a city. So a city needs to select a new public transportation system, and the options could be light rail, bus rapid transit, subway, and the criteria could be cost, capacity, environmental impact, and accessibility. MCDM can help to evaluate these options and select the most suitable system. On the other side, let us say you want to evaluate the urban development plans. Different urban development plans are proposed for a city, and criteria can include economic growth, social equity, environmental sustainability, and cultural preservation. MCDM can help the ranking of the plans on their performance across this criteria. Engineering and manufacturing is another domain in which multi-criteria decision making is widely used. For example, you want to select a material for a product. So engineers need to choose the best material for a new product, and criteria include strength, weight, cost, durability, and recyclability. MCDM approach like TOPSIS can really help. Designing a manufacturing process. Different manufacturing processes are available for producing a product, and you may like to consider the criteria like cost, product quality, production time, and environmental impact. MCDM helps evaluate these processes and select the most efficient and suitable method. Similarly, healthcare is one of the most critical area where you want to consider the criteria like medical urgency, waiting time, age, and compatibility. MCDM can significantly help. If you want to choose the technology for healthcare, then the cost, safety, patient satisfaction are the considerations. Finance and investment, again, there is a huge application of MCDM. Selecting investment portfolio like mutual fund, they decide the proportion of the fund to be allocated to various stocks, securities, and so on. So risk, liquidity, investment are the consideration, and evaluating project proposal where profitability, risk, strategic fit, and social impact are critical. MCDM can really help. So if you look at the key characteristics of MCDM approaches, then it includes multiple criteria, conflicting, both subjective, objective, tangible, and intangible. Conflicting objectives, structured evaluation it provides, stakeholder involvement is necessary, and also it is beneficial to reach to consensus. I would like to highlight the papers I published in the domain of multi-criteria decision making, addressing different kind of complex problems like selecting third-party logistics problem. The use of interpretive structural modeling and analytic network process was deployed. Total quality management in self-financing, technical institutions, quality function deployment, QFD and force field analysis was used. Implementing Six Sigma in service sector, analytic hierarchy process. Similarly, evaluating buyer-supplier relationship, interpretive structural modeling and graph theory was used. Then development of balanced scorecard for healthcare, ISM and ANP, comparative assessment of performance of higher education institution, data envelopment analysis and AHP were deployed. Similarly, I have also integrated the use of system dynamics and analytic network process for schedule and cost overrun analysis for R&D projects in the real world complex scenario. A quantitative framework for lean and green assessment was developed using D-metal and AHP and so on. So there are various applications we have developed like analysis of supply chain complexity drivers, SAPLab, which is a qualitative analysis tool, and analytic hierarchy process were used. So just to conclude, multi-criteria decision making addresses quite a complex, versatile area where conflicting criteria can be accommodated and the various critical alternatives be examined, ranked, prioritized, and the consensus of the subject experts can be sought. To conclude, my university, Gati Shakti Vishwavidyalaya, is India's first and only university in transportation and logistics sector. It has a unique role to play in terms of providing highly skilled manpower for all the modes of transport, rail, road, water, aviation, ports, and shipping. And GSV extends programs at all the levels, undergraduate, postgraduate, PhD, and executive training to enable nation's aspiration to reduce its logistics cost from 14% to 8 to 9%. Transportation sector is a growth engine for India. It contributes roughly about 6.3% of GDP, and the university offers demand-driven curriculum with a focus on three dimensions: technology, that is infrastructure, management, that is services, and policy, that is regulation, to strengthen the ecosystem of multimodal transportation and logistics in the country. In line with the vision, innovation-led, industry-driven university, Gati Shakti Vishwavidyalaya has collaborated with the various leading industries such as Airbus, Nippon Koi, Siemens, Nokia, Jacobs, Plaza India, Railtel, and many others. Thank you for your interest in learning the various dimensions on faculty and student development. We will keep exploring more issues through this platform for the benefit of faculty and student, most critical entity in higher education in India. Thank you very much.